This is a conversation with Simon Squibb, an entrepreneur, investor, and founder of the Purposeful Project, a podcast and organization that helps entrepreneurs for free. He's invested in over 60 startups and mentored hundreds of founders. His focus is on inspiring and guiding new and experienced entrepreneurs as they follow their path. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by me. Please go to joshcherryplays.com/links to see what I'm up to. When is it appropriate to hire? How do you navigate that?
It's a tricky one to answer generically because I think every business is different, every person is different. But I mean, some businesses, in my view, the first hire you ever make is your co-founder, the person who you bring in. Now, you might not be in a traditional sense hiring them. Maybe there's an equity deal involved and you're both putting money in, so it's disguised as something else. But ultimately, they're your first hire. I mean, the second hire, if you don't get a co-founder, you could argue this is your first hire, is to get a board of advisors and the people around you that can help you with the things that you don't know. And the third hire, again, depending on whether you've got a co-founder or not, so it could be a second hire, your third hire, I believe, should always be doing exactly what it is that needs to be done for the business that you don't like to do. So in my case, pretty much every business I've ever started, I've got an accountant to help me as quickly as possible, so I don't, escalate the problem by doing it wrong from day one. Yes, I've now learned accounts actually, because I've signed off so many accounts on 19 companies I've started and all these companies I've invested in. I've signed off on so many accounts. I've accidentally learned about accounts, but I still don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It actually hinders me to even think about the numbers on things. So, but they're important. You can't neglect them. So they're the first few hire. I think basically I always say to people, try to hire someone as soon as you can. Why? Because it creates what I consider a legitimate business. Until you hire someone, in reality, you're not really accountable to anybody. And that can sometimes mean that you don't work as hard. You're not as motivated. If you actually have someone's salary to pay, or you're responsible for someone else, it motivates you. And that motivation can be a karma thing. It can come back to you as well. The recent business I started, I hired someone called Talia, and she's so enthusiastic about the business that actually energizes me. And if I hadn't hired her, I might have run out of power a while ago, because it's not enough to do it on your own, I think, because we're sociable creatures, we're tribal, right? So we kind of need to, I think, hire someone as soon as possible. And I personally don't think you can really call yourself an entrepreneur until you've got a few people that you're reportable to, even if they are your employees.
And what you said about learning by accident, how you've just had so many experiences with accounts that now you understand them. I think that's super underrated. I'm noticing the effects of just accelerating something that you can do, where there's this situation where you don't worry about your weakness and you lean on a strength, and it makes you do whatever it is you're doing 3 times as fast.
Yep.
It results in you getting 3 times as much exposure to the thing that is your weakness. And I think you end up learning the thing faster sometimes than if you would have just gone and tried to focus on building it up.
There's probably a really clever physics analogy around this, but that's so true. I mean, the way I would explain what you just said in my own experience is that I have never cared about accounts. I've never really cared about finances in general. I always cared about the business, the mission, and what we were trying to execute. And because I've been so focused on these things, money came in. And because money came in, the financial system became bigger. And because it was bigger, I learned more. So it's kind of, whereas if I'd gone and learned accounts or studied accounts, then frankly, I would have been scared at points and not even done a business, I think, sometimes. You'd be so scared of cash flow. Some of the business I've got involved in have had very bad cash flow. And if I'd actually understood cash flow, I probably wouldn't have done them. But because I did them and then I pushed so hard to make them work, I pushed through the pain of the cash flow to make them work. But if I'd known the numbers, I probably would have crunched the numbers and never done it.
What was the most odd business that you found yourself in?
I've been involved in a lot of odd businesses, so it's very subjective, isn't it? But I mean, two businesses jump in my mind when you say it. I was involved in a comic book business. So I invested in a company called Devashard. And the basic premise of the comic book business was that that what if Superman or landed in China instead of America? What would that look like? What if Batman was born in Russia? It's interesting when you ask people in the West, in England where I live, like, if Superman landed in Russia, what would it look like? Or landed in China, what would it look like? And they're kind of like, oh, he'd be evil. He'd want to take over the world. But like, why? Is the same person nurture nature? What's the reasoning for that belief? So that was the premise, and it really kind of caught my imagination. And yeah, so that's probably one of the strangest businesses, because I never read comic books when I grew up. I knew nothing about the comic book business at all. And so I guess for me it was strange, but for a lot of people it might have been their dream to be involved in the comic book business. But to me it was like, oh, I like the people, and the premise of the idea appealed to me, and that's why I got involved.
What was the first business you started?
I started a gardening company when I was 15 years old. I basically left school at 15, and in part because of that, my mother kicked me out of home, so I was homeless and had nowhere to go every day, and so I had to survive, and so I was 5 days homeless, and then ended up in this kind of squat kind of premises that was really awful. And I thought to myself, I've got to do something to get out of this mess that I find myself suddenly in. And then I always tell people that there's a part of my brain that just woke up, which I call now the entrepreneurial muscle. It's a muscle, entrepreneurship. It's a muscle, and it's inside your brain, and it just woke up. I wasn't really one of those kids that was selling lemonade outside my house at 7. No, I was not. I was playing football. I was having fun climbing up a tree. I was eating too many biscuits. So I wasn't selling lemonade. And so, but this necessity to survive woke up a part of my brain, and I started a gardening company. And I started it with no money, no website, of course, no brochure, no registered company, no past experience, no network, no nothing. And I started it by knocking on someone's door and saying a fake it till you make it line, which was, hi, my name's Simon Squibb, and I've got a gardening company. Would you like me to take care of your garden? And to my shock, they said, sure, yes, I've been looking for someone to help me. And it's a long story. I've done a TED talk on it, so people can go listen to it, or TEDx talk, I guess we should say. And you can go and listen to it if you want to know the full story. But that was my first business, and it worked out pretty well.
Thinking about entrepreneurship, it's interesting to think about, okay, what's the difference between somebody that's doing the entrepreneur thing and the person that's thinking about doing the entrepreneur thing?
Well, I guess the only difference is the doing it gets you in the kind of action stage. By thinking about it, it can get you in the fear stage.
Yes.
So too many people get stuck in the fear stage, and if you think about it too long, you don't do it. It's like Netflix. If you go on Netflix and try to pick something to watch, I know, we've all probably got caught in that. I've just watched this trailer, I've just watched that trailer, and if you're not careful, you'll never watch anything. And half an hour has gone by, and you're like, it's getting a bit late. I think I'll just go on the internet or something, so you don't end up watching anything. And I think you just got to press play on something, really, my view. But that's the difference. It's watching the trailers or watching the movie. That's the difference.
I've definitely spent an evening watching trailers before.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say is I see it more and more as the person that is not entrepreneuring tends to think, I need to figure this out. And then the person that is entrepreneuring tends to think something like, I'm in this mess. Here I am. I got to figure this out. And it's the same thing, but one is, I mean, I guess it could go back to that in the arena quote. But it kind of goes back to, somebody is looking at a puddle of mud and the person is walking in the puddle of mud. It seems about like that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's always, frankly, I would say the only kind of tweak I'd have on it is that when you're thinking about starting a business, you tend to plan it out right to the end, and often the conclusion isn't good because we are fearful people.
Yes.
But when you just started something, you have thought about it, but you're not really thinking about the end. You're thinking about the now, and we all know living in the now is better, because there's no it's much better to just be standing in a puddle, realizing yes it's wet, yes it's muddy, but hell this is fun, and standing outside the puddle, not knowing the fun bit and just thinking, why would I stand in that puddle? I'm just going to get wet.
And does this tie back to the idea of the strengths and the weaknesses? Because the planning stage seems to be sort of looking for every weakness, every fail point. But actually doing it, you don't have time. You don't have that capability. You have to do the things that you're capable of instead, which are your strengths.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when I was younger, there was no hesitation to just going and doing it. I think as I've got older, and I'm not saying this is good, I think I like to plan things a bit more now, partly because I think there's a happy medium between planning and execution. And I would argue that even, as someone that's now run 19 companies, I think 3 weeks of executing and 1 week of thinking isn't a bad idea. I should probably write a book on it, competing with the 3-hour work week, whatever it is, 4-hour work week. I think there's something in the execute for 3 weeks, think for a week. Because sometimes I have executed and executed and executed, and then 5 years up, 5 years later, I've looked up and said, "Oh my God, what animal? What have I built here? What is this? What is this
Yes.
humongous animal I'm having to feed every day that owns me?" And so you have got to have a little bit of caution, I think, around it, but not so much that you don't do it.
Yeah, it relates to an analogy I keep coming back to of like the idea of for somebody to have a vision of something. And having a vision for something is not inconsequential. It's not useless. It can actually be really, really valuable. But we often like live in that world of the dream of the thing that we want to create. And I keep coming back to the analogy of the guiding star. So if your vision is a guiding star, then like think about like what does a traveler do with a guiding star? Well, they look up at the guiding star and then they look down at the path and they start walking. And they walk for a couple of miles and then they glance back up at the star. And to me, that is sort of the function of the vision. And if you're walking down the path just like staring at the star the whole time, then, and to me, in my mind, with this analogy, that's thinking about it all the time. Then eventually, the path curves and you just walk right off of cliff without noticing what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a practical version of that is for me, like most of the business I've started, actually, I tend to have I don't have a big vision. I tend to have a small idea that ends up a big vision. So, it's not, I mean, like my present project, originally I didn't have the idea that I could help 10 million people start a business. That was not my original thinking. My original thinking was much smaller than that. My original thinking was, I know the world's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm going to ask them to share their knowledge with me in an interview format so I can share it with the world and those that might need it. That was it. It wasn't as big as my vision is now. And I think that every single business I've ever started is like that. I had a creative agency called Fluid, and there's just a really talented designer who I could see was not being paid properly for the quality that they were producing. So I decided to get involved and help them leverage their skill set, get paid what they deserved for their skill set. And that just turned into this massive creative agency that we basically were the only agency that cared about the creative people as opposed to just the clients. And so, but a lot of the time it starts off small, it's just a problem in front of me, an opportunity in front of me that is executable, that can scale over time. And I think that's, again, I don't want to say bad planning on my side, but you could argue it's just seeing something small and doing it well and seeing how you can scale it up from there.
And I'm trying to hold in my mind a lot with the things that I'm doing. I've had a bunch of opportunity come my way with all the things that have happened on TikTok. It's exciting. It's wonderful. Um, and it's taught me a bunch of lessons. And one of them is that I'm too stupid to know what's going to happen next.
Mm,
And the more I learn that, the
right.
more I feel less hesitation about having a small plan.
Mm,
Because if I have that in my mind, and I have it in a, I'm trying to hold it in a positive way, where it's like, okay, I'm dumb. I don't know all the options right now. What could I do this week that would move me forwards in some way so that I would know something more next week? And I'm more and more getting like shortening my time scales like this. And it's never been a bad idea so far.
it's very empowering, actually.
Yeah.
But, I think that's the problem with we're so gifted as a race. I think humans have this kind of frontal cortex that has a unique ability that other animals don't have, which is we don't need to experience something to know how it could play out. So I don't need to go on a roller coaster ride right now to know. I can put my mind there and know what that feeling might be like or what that experience could be like. No other animal can do that, right? And it's such a wonderful superpower, but its weakness is sometimes our frontal cortex will tell us not to do something because of what we think the experience will be like. So, and that's where we fall over, I think. That's why it's a bit dangerous to have perhaps too long a timeline. That's why a lot of people get disappointed. They have like, I'm going to go on holiday a year from now, and they're building up to that moment when they think they're going to have this euphoric, happy moment, and then COVID comes and the holiday get cancelled and the whole world's over. Like, as opposed to just living in this week and being grateful for it.
What are some of the questions that new business owners don't know to ask?
I guess one of the things I've noticed that I didn't know what to ask, and I think a lot of people I realize don't know what to ask and should, is kind of what's the purpose of the business? What's my purpose in this company? Why do I care about this company? Is this something people don't ask themselves because they're too busy often either selling to a potential customer or client or user or to an investor, the reason this business is going to be good, but they don't sell it to themselves, I think, enough. And they don't truly ask themselves, is this something I really want to do? Is this my passion? Is this my purpose in life? And they don't ask themselves that because sometimes they don't know what their purpose is in life. So they go, they don't even know to ask themselves that question because they don't even know it's possible they have a purpose. But I think purpose to me is one of those words that's just not taught in school and should be top of mind when it comes to like your day-to-day life. Like what is it you could do every day? A bit like we were talking earlier about your strengths and weaknesses. And the education system tries to iron them all out. So I was in a maths class every day for like 5 years in school, and I hate maths. But they tried to flatten me out, right? They're like, he doesn't know maths. Let's work on him harder. He's one of those, 80% rule. We need to work on him harder. And actually, what they should have done is doubled down on my, drama or communication skills because those are the things I enjoy. But yeah, I think purpose never comes up in school. It's never. It might say, "What will you do when you grow up?" That sometimes comes up, but they never ask you what problem will you solve in the world that matters to you when you grow up. And that's the question I think you should be asking yourself.
Are purpose and passion different in your mind, and how do you differentiate those two?
I think they're interlinked. I mean, I can be passionate about something and not be my purpose. So, in England, a lot of people are passionate about football. I don't know why, but they are. And so, and they can be, happy passionate or violent passionate. There's all sorts of types of passions, but they love football, but it's not necessarily their purpose. They're not footballers. They're not running a football club. And so I think you can be passionate about things. And a lot of that comes from your subconscious, in my view, from your 0 to 7 years. Whatever your parents were passionate about goes into your subconscious, and you end up being somewhat passionate about it as well without even realizing it. But purpose is different. I think purpose is almost like the mission, like Elon Musk's mission to save the human race and get them on Mars, make us a multi-planetary species. You can talk yourself into a purpose as well, and then realize you've got the skill set to make that thing happen. But I would say passion, of course, comes into your purpose. You have to be passionate, but no one's passionate every day. You'd literally be like worn out in a week if you're passionate all the time.
Yeah.
So you've got to have, I think, purpose is a long-term thing, and passion, in my view, is a short-term thing.
Yeah, I feel like passion is something that could be symptomatic of purpose. It's something that purpose could make it more likely that passion might arise.
That's true.
What is the utility of purpose?
I think it's drive. I think I guess when I was younger, if I reflect, I guess survival gave me passion. Having a home I could, sleep safely in, and no rain dripping on my head, and it was warm. That I was passionate to have that. So I think a lot of people want, you earn money is probably a good motivator. I want to earn money so I can buy that nice car, so that I can do that Instagram post and get lots of likes, whatever that. There's short-term passion around those sorts of things, but I think long-term purpose plays a very important role in driving you, because if money isn't fulfilling you as you think it might, a lot of people think that's the first port of call when it comes to my purpose is to earn money for my family. That's often the line I hear, and it's not, that's not really a purpose. That's almost like a necessity. But I think if you get purpose right, it can literally make you work for nothing. You do not care about anything other than the purpose. And that drive, that gets you out of bed in the morning. I mean, it gets me out of bed every day. I don't need to go to work anymore. So why do I go and work so hard? I go and work so hard because I think I've got something that's very important that I'm doing that is bigger than me. And that's where I think it gets really exciting. It can really power you up.
If someone were listening and decided that that was useful, which I certainly think that it is, but they don't have any sense of it, how would you develop a sense of it? How would you
Yeah, I mean,
look for it?
It's the basics. The basic way of finding it, I guess, you're talking about finding your purpose in a way there. I think is, first of all, asking yourself the question, like everything really, questioning things leads to knowledge, right? Asking the questions, and whether you then go on Google to get the answer, or however you get the knowledge, that the first step is asking yourself the question, right? And I think asking yourself, what is my purpose, begins to wake up something in you that analyzes what that could be. And you might not have the answer straight away. Most people don't have the answer straight away. There is probably a next step, and that's to hang out with people that do have purpose. Because so I remember when I moved to Hong Kong, before I moved to Hong Kong, a lot of people were telling me about, Hong Kong's this communist, place run by China, and it's this, it's that, and everyone had an opinion. And it wasn't until I went there that I really learned what that city was like and what it was really like to live in China. And I think same with like purpose. If you hang out with people with purpose, you'll see what I am talking about. You'll see that they've just got an edge. They've got an energy level that you can't explain by their food intake. They've got an inquisitive mindset around that purpose that, makes them obsessed about getting it right, whatever it is. And you have to see it to understand it. And once you understand it and you're thinking about it, it is only a matter of time and space before it happens to you. And sometimes your purpose can be aligned with someone else's purpose. So that's happened to me. I've hung out with someone who's got purpose, and I'm so excited by their purpose, it becomes my purpose. And so that's what relationships end up often being, my wife is very much into education, and it's become part of my purpose because she's so passionate about it and I love her. And then I've listened to her and learned, understood it. And then I'm still using my skill set to help with that purpose. And it's actually her purpose. But then I'm also taking my purpose, which is help millions of people to start a business of their own, and applying it to her purpose, which is educate people when they're young to understand how the world works for real, right? So your purposes can align, you can jive off each other, you can improve because, so I say hang out with other people with purpose. That's the simple answer.
I agree. This just comes up in conversation a lot, is where the idea of where the average of the 5 people we know, or the 5 closest people we know, and to level up those people that we know is can have just exponential and unimaginable effects on your life. And a lot of people like ask me how to do it, how to level up the people that you have around you. And the thing that I always go back to, and I might be biased because it's something that I want to do, I guess. But to me, I always consider it like when somebody talks about like building a network and bringing people to you, I always say that the most magnetic thing you can do is build stuff. And because to the act of building stuff is it's sort of putting a flag in the ground and like creating a little bit of your own identity that says I stand for this, and it creates the potential for a tribe, right, around the thing that you're building. That's the thing I always come to. Do you have any other thoughts on that of how to gather around the right people?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing too, because people like Gary Vee are always saying like get rid of the negative people in your life, which I tend to agree with. I would also say he also says that people losers, dump losers in your life, and I don't know, that's going a step too far, because I mean, what is a loser anyway? And I do feel like sometimes I have quite enjoyed having a varied profile in my life. So, I like hanging out with artists, for example. I like hanging out with creative people. And in some classes of society that I hang out with, they would call them losers. They're not making big money, like, so what is a loser and what isn't? I think it's all about energy. And so I think it's about moral code alignment. It's about maybe having the ability, in my case anyway, having the ability to have open dialogue with people about any subject, and being able to learn from each other and being open-minded. But I think that you've got to be a bit careful with the whole get rid of losers in your life. I say, people, for example, I've got school friends, for example, who many would describe as losers, but I wouldn't necessarily cut them out of my life because I've got history with them. They ground me sometimes, and I think that's important. But I think the advice I'd probably give to people is know yourself, and if there are people that aren't aligned with you moral code wise, I would cut them out, because you don't want to be corrupted by them, and you don't want to get caught up in their corruption. And so yeah, I've got an older brother, for example, who doesn't align with my moral code. He cares way too much about money, and he's not part of my life. I don't like saying it. It makes me sad, because I feel family should always be together. It's almost like I'm doing something wrong if one of my family members is part of my life. But equally, I know he's not aligned with how I think about the world. I don't want to say he's wrong and I'm right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we just have different views on the world. And when I recognize that, that's when I realize he's probably not the right person to have in my life. Not because he's a loser, because he's not. He's financially very successful, but it's about moral code.
Going back a little bit, you mentioned in talking about passion and purpose, you mentioned, wanting to survive at the beginning, and for that you want to make money, and then that shifting over time. That's something I wanted to ask you about, is how have your views on money shifted over the years? Because you've been in business for a long time now. So I imagine that you've gone through multiple evolutions on how you view money.
Yeah. Okay. Bluntly, I hate money.
All right.
I do. It is kind of the first virtual reality item that we've all kind of bought into as real. I mean, money is not real. It used to at least be backed by gold in the UK, for example. It used to be backed by a physical product. It's not anymore, and so it doesn't really hold any value. And psychologically, I see it play out in people's lives. People will say, "I've got this dream business I want to do, but I don't have the money to do it," and they don't do it. And the reality is, what the truth is, they're not doing their dream because they think money is the reason not to do the dream. In a way, it's used as an excuse, or if they don't realize it's an excuse, at the very least is a lack of imagination. Because most of the businesses I've started have required no money. But having said that, the thing about money, and of course there might be a lot of people listening that like, well, I've got no money, so it's easy for you to say that, but I think money is one of those things that I never cared about money. Okay, yeah, I wanted to survive, but I think money is unfortunately part of the broken system that we're living in. Right, money is required to live. But if you go back, I've lived in Thailand, for example, and you go out to the outskirts of some of the villages in Thailand, and if you went out to one of the villages in Thailand and you lay down on the floor and you went to sleep, someone, and this has happened to me because I kind of wanted to explore Thailand, someone will come over to you and say, do you want to come and stay in our tent? Don't be out here cold. Come inside. You look cold out here. Come inside. And then they take you into their tent. They're like, do you want some rice or something? Are you hungry? Have some food. You know, and money doesn't even come into the equation. People just, they would never let someone in their village, in their tribe, be cold and hungry. If they were a good person, they'd have shelter. Someone would always bring them into their tent. And someone's always got some rice to help them, right? And money isn't even part of the conversation. It's really about, are you a decent person or not? If you're decent to your people in your village, then they'll be decent to you. If you're not, of course, someone's going to bring you into their tent if you're not decent, right? So I think money's become this weird construct, and that's why you need money today. And I'm not saying, you know, you don't need money. I'm saying it has less value than you think. And in reality, imagination has more value than you think. And that's my view on money now, is that it is really just mostly in people's heads. There is always going to be a certain amount you need to live, pay for rent, whatever, food. But in reality, most people, if you tell them they've got $1 million in the bank, and you say, just sit back and imagine you've got $1 million in the bank, they'll smile. They'll imagine, but nothing's changed. And they could come back to the real world with that $1 million imagination of the money in their bank and have a happier day, all because they imagine they've got the money in the bank, or they'd imagine they could buy if they wanted to, as opposed to like, they wouldn't even spend it. I've seen this with people that make a lot of money. They think they're happier, they've got money in the bank. Nothing's actually changed, except their mindset.
This ties in perfectly with what I wanted to ask next, which is the thing that is sometimes connected to money, sometimes not, I guess we could say. What I wanted to ask is, how is value created?
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing, value. So I help entrepreneurs for free. I help people for free. And people say, oh, well, if you do it free, people don't value it. That is not true, right? I've noticed the poorest people in the world, you give them something for nothing. There's nothing more valuable. You've helped them with no catch. There's nothing more valuable. I have paid for things that have no value. You know, I mean, we've all probably been on a course or something where we're like, that was a waste of money, right? You paid for it and it had no value, right? So free has value. And I think value is all a question, in my view, of perspective. Because at the end of the day, I can easily, I can build a business tomorrow that has value based on the brand, and it hasn't even executed anything yet. Just by saying, okay, Simon Squibb's involved, and this person's doing involved, and that's going to happen, and this is going to happen. I've created value in a series of sentences that you could argue in the real world has no value, but I could probably sell it for real money. Right? Most of the businesses I've created are value from nothing, from your mind, your imagination to reality. The gardening company didn't have any value until I stood on that doorstep and told someone it existed. And then they said yes to it. Okay, you could say it increased in value the day I got a client, right? But that's how we all start. You start with something you believe to have value, and then you make it have value over time. But then the trick is, at the end, in my view, is to know what value it has for you, right? And that's where some people go wrong, because they're like, they don't enjoy what they've got, or they think money is the value of their business, like how much money they've got, and then they spend that money trying to make themselves happy. And we all know money doesn't make you happy unless you're already happy. If you have money and you're unhappy, it just expands that unhappiness. So in reality, you've got to be happy before you get money, to be happy when you've got money.
Yeah, I often think that money is useful, I guess, to the degree that it can store that value well. And then if it can't do that, it's a little purposeless. And then a store of value in and of itself is not that useful either, because we only notice value in its transition from one thing to another. So I think for example, money, you know, if it's retaining value, then the moment that we register it as such is the moment that it transfers from one person to another. What do you think about that?
Yeah, makes sense to me. I think, again, value to me is all in your own mind, right? The value of yourself. You know, your hourly rate is a good example. I hate people. You should never sell by the hour anything, but people's perception of their value for an hour is so varied. And so, it's all in your mind. Value is all in your mind. It's when I had nothing, I was pretty happy, actually. So that's when I realized the value of time is so much more valuable than making money. Right? If I have time, to come and be on this podcast with you now. I can decide what I do. That's value to me. I'm not making any money doing this. You're not making any money doing this, but this is valuable to me. I get to meet you. I get to connect to your community. You get to connect to mine. That has value. And I think well, I'm sure we'll get into crypto at some point, but crypto is a good one. Another example, like, what is Bitcoin worth? Okay, it's worth what people imagine it to be worth. Is it cheap today? Is it still crazy expensive? It's all dependent on your value, your idea of value, right? So it's an interesting one, but it's all in the end just about your mindset. Everything's pretty much just about your mindset.
Yeah, let's go there. I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, the marketing philosopher, and a lot of the stuff that I've read of his makes me think of value as the story, which is, what you're saying about it being in the mind, right? Because we hold on to things in our minds through stories. And I think Bitcoin is a phenomenal story. I think it's utilizing that store of value concept, and also it's created almost an idealized version of the story of the store of value. What about the crypto space excites you?
I mean, I strip it back to its core. I mean, bluntly, I've got cryptocurrency. I'm not a big fan as such. I'm a fan of blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
I think blockchain is democracy. I think democracy in the UK, for example, is broken. It's not really democracy. First of all, it's a parliamentary democracy in the UK, which is it's basically power is in the hands of a short number of people. It's not democracy in my mind was meant to be, I have a vote, I have the power to make change happen. Well, if I'm on the side of the 49% that lost the election, I don't have any power to make any change, right? Whereas blockchain represents to me, at its very core, a real democracy. Decentralization, no one controlling it, and we the people make it work or not work. And so, in a bizarre twist, to me, it is actually potentially a replacement for a broken political system.
I think it could be, yes. It's the intensity behind what people are exploring in the blockchain is fascinating, because it's one of the most closely tied combinations of concepts, ideas, idealism, even almost, I guess you could say, religious thought, with structures and code and math, things that are very, very fixed. And I don't know that it's ever happened to that degree before. I've read a study about children growing up. I used to teach kids for years as well, so it's something that I've watched a lot. Is that a child at an early age, their mental experience of the world is very little different from somebody that's an adult that's on an acid trip. Everything's sort of blurry and blobby and changing and morphing, and it's all variable. And over time, they go through the process of like solidifying things and creating structures out of this to make sense of it. And this is both an incredible strength and a weakness. So the fact that they're in that state makes them immensely malleable and able to absorb material at an enormous rate, but also, they're very incapable of long-term survival. They're not able to provide consistency. And I think of the modern economy right now much as a very young child that's on an acid trip, because the value of the dollar and every other currency is just fluctuating wildly all the time, and everything is malleable and up for debate. And so as a result, we can't really clarify what our direction is and create consistent cultures based on even just the economic element of it. And I feel like blockchain is something that potentially could provide us enough clarity to create structures that would give us some consistency to would allow us to move forwards and be a more long-term culture.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I guess ultimately, well, using the kid analogy is an interesting one. I've got a 3.5-year-old, so I can see how he's evolving, but I think transparency is what I really like about the potential of things like blockchain. I mean, I think right now, like with corporations and platforms all controlling things, right now you and I could be kicked off TikTok. We'd have no control over that, and that would be it. We'd no longer be able to connect with people that want to connect with us. So I think platforms will have to become more open source and people controlled. You can't just decide unilaterally that, oh, I don't like Josh Terry anymore. He did a piece on TikTok being a bad platform, and we're going to block him, and that's it. You're gone. And I don't think that's people aren't going to want to operate like that anymore. They're going to want freedom. But I think kids, as they grow up now, the way I look at my son, the way he learns, I mean, I feel like school actually slows him down in learning. School tries to give him, okay, you've got 1 hour of science now, you've got 1 hour of this, you've got 1 hour. That's slowing down his learning, because instead of him going out there and naturally experiencing the world, they're trying to artificially teach him things that, I mean, it's a bit like, teaching a kid to walk. Ken Robinson did a TED talk on this,
Yes.
So if you're in education, I'm sure you know, but I just love the whole analogy that he had, and it's sad that he's no longer with us because he was a genius, but you don't teach a kid to walk, right? People do try, and they're like, right, you're 1 now, so you better start walking. Come on, stand up, and we never did that with my son. He just one day started walking, and I think maybe the thing I'm liking about blockchain, partly I think it's just naturally happening. You can't, yes. No one can artificially make it happen. And yes, you're going to have fluctuations because there's manipulations by the original infrastructure, by the original platforms. But I think long term it will even out, and as it becomes more acceptable, the system is learning itself. You're not teaching the system anything. It's not like Facebook that made a natural progression based on its learnings. And blockchain is learning on its own. I guess that's what AI is, right? AI is that same model where the machine will learn quicker than we can ever learn. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting have you got children? Do you know what I mean?
I do not.
Yeah, it's blown my mind. Of course, I was a child once, so I know what they look like. But about actually having a child and watching how they learn. If you don't teach them anything, how much they learn on their own. Yes. And so that's kind of how I see blockchain. You can't teach it anything; it's going to happen on its own. But like you say, it's growing up right now, so it's a bit like the Wild Wild West.
Yes. What got you into podcasting?
Basically, I was reading about the impact of technology on the future workplace, and there was an article about how 10 million people will probably lose their job just in their vehicle linked businesses when vehicles start driving themselves. So truck drivers and Uber drivers and all these people that rely on an income, a living from driving vehicles in some shape or form would be out of work. And the same article talked about how doctors were going to get replaced by machines, and that machines could actually predict what's wrong with people better than a tired, jaded human ever could. So it kind of scared me, because I thought to myself, wow, what's going to happen? We're going to have more Trumps elected, and it's going to be mayhem. And I thought, what can I do to help? And actually, I simply thought to myself, I know all these successful entrepreneurs. Why don't I interview them? I think I mentioned this earlier. Interview them and find out how they started their business and what they know, and almost make entrepreneurship something anyone can do, instead of this kind of mystical, only Elon Musk types can do it, and make everyone realize that anyone can do it. If you're a truck driver today, you can be an entrepreneur tomorrow. It's probably the easiest next step for you. And I thought to myself, if I can get that knowledge of entrepreneurship in the hands of all these people that are going to get disrupted by technology, they won't need to wait for a job to replace the one they've lost, but they can create one for themselves. But initially, I just thought, why don't I interview all these people I know and find out what they know about entrepreneurship that I don't know, and share that in an open format, being a podcast, and see if it's useful for people. And then it just escalated from there, really.
And was the Purposeful Project before that, after that, or one and the same?
Way after. So originally the podcast was called The Good Luck Club. And I didn't really have the full vision in place. I just knew that I could get knowledge from people that knew into the hands of people that didn't know. But I didn't really have the big picture vision that the Purposeful Project now has. So originally I thought, okay, what would be an interesting podcast, apart from just interviewing interesting entrepreneurs? What ingredient do all these people have that made them successful and so many people have failed? And the one thing I felt that they all had that no one else had was luck. I felt like luck was this untangible thing that literally, in my life anyway, made a difference between success and failure. I could have easily been broke and still homeless today if I hadn't had a couple of moments of luck. And so I thought it would be really interesting to explore that. So I called it the Good Luck Club originally. And as I built out the platform, the Good Luck Club concept felt a bit gimmicky. And I was trying to do something quite serious, which is get knowledge in the hands of people that are going to need it. So that's when I think I evolved the model into what is now the Purposeful Project model. And now we don't just do podcasts, we do free webinars, we do all sorts of activities to support people who want to start or grow a company that go way beyond just a podcast. But the podcast was a good start.
Can I get you to go back for a little bit to the luck idea? I've often thought, I still think that one of the major elements of success is not a big break necessarily, but optimizing your life to be able to take advantage of breaks, optimizing your life to take advantage of luck. Can you speak on luck for a moment? Where does that fit now?
I can. And it's a bit simplistic, what you just described there.
Mm-hmm.
And the quotes that fly around that are missing something are, the harder you work, the luckier you get, is a good example. That's not true. That's not true.
Yeah.
Most of the really successful people aren't working that hard. They're working smart, you could argue. But I know for myself that, I brought in people to run businesses that I've started. I've worked less hard, made more money, been more successful. So I've worked less hard, I've been more successful. And then the other, opportunity, what is the saying? It's when suddenly can't remember, opportunity meets, I can't remember the saying. But there's a saying basically where ultimately what it's trying to illustrate, and it will come to me in a minute, unless you can remember it, Josh.
It's at the back of my mind.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
But anyway, there's all these sayings out there that try to simplify luck, but luck is not simple. This is my take on luck very quickly. Actually, luck itself is
when opportunity meets preparation.
That's it. Thank you. When opportunity meets preparation, which sounds good. Yeah. But without persistence, you won't meet that moment. If you gave up, for example, even though you were prepared and the opportunity was coming, there's always an ingredient missing out of these quotes, right? And that's that. Persistence is the ingredient missing out of that quote, as an example. So actually, this is how luck breaks down very quickly. I discovered that luck is really is actually a formula, but before you can give the formula, you have to understand how luck breaks down. So luck in the dictionary is a random act, right? A random act. So, but there are two types of random acts. So the first type of random act, I'm going to call 2% of your life, right? And this 2% of your life, an example would be, where you're born. You can't do anything about it. Doesn't matter what you do, how hard you work, and how much you're prepared. You are going to get born where you are going to get born, and that will have a huge effect on your life, right? So let's face it, where you're born has a huge effect on your life, and that is 2% of your life, but that's still a random luck. You can't control it. You can argue COVID is another example. It happened to us all. Nothing you can do about it. Forget conspiracy theories for a minute. Just assume it is what it is. It happened randomly to us all. But there's 98% of your life where you can influence luck. But influencing luck is a complex formula that I can break down in 3 simple steps. The first is probably the most important. You've got to take a lot of risk. A more true saying would be, the more risk you take, the luckier you get. Nothing to do with hard work. The more risk you take, the luckier you get. But people don't take risks. They have a fear mechanism, we talked about this earlier, that kicks in, and people people have misunderstood how fear works today. Right? Fear originally was designed, lions coming towards us. We actually have almost like a superpower when fear kicks in. We can think faster, we can move faster, we act different, we are innovative, and we are alive. Right? Fear is a good thing, it's an asset. But today we have the ability to switch off fear by just saying no to something. If someone says, come to a public speech event to 2,000 people, oh no, straight away that fear you had is gone, right? But that's not what you're meant to do with fear. You're meant to leverage it to push you to do things differently. So you lean into fear, take more risk. That's the number 1 factor to increasing your luck. The second factor is basically knowing your destination. So many people don't know where they're going. And the best way I can explain this is like a car analogy. If you don't know where you're going, you can go around in circles. But a lot of people, I invest in a lot of businesses, and when I'm investing, I always say to people, you know, what's your destination? And the answer I often get, which is the wrong answer in my view, is, oh, I'm trying to build up this business so Uber will buy it for $1 billion, or whatever. I'm like, that is not a destination. That is fuel for your car. Money is only fuel for your car. It is never going to be anything more than that. And once you know your destination, then you know how much fuel you need. And once you know your destination, you know who to have in the car with you to get there. You know what vehicle you need to go on that terrain. Then you know how much fuel you need. And you know what to pack in the car for when you arrive at your destination. But without destination, you go around in circles. And then the final thing is persistence. If you have more persistence, you are more lucky. And so I know myself, I mean, my agency business called Fluid, which I sold to PwC, 15 years of persistence. If at any point I had given up, I wouldn't be sitting here today having the time to spend with you doing this podcast. I'd be working. You know, and I think that persistence approach is something so underestimated. And I could go on and on about it. There's all sorts of ins and outs of all 3 of these points that I could go on about forever. But it is much more complex than the basic Instagram quotes that people throw around. And that's why people come unstuck, because I'm working hard. Why am I not making it? You know, I took advantage of the opportunity and I was prepared, but they didn't make it. And so luck is something I think for people's mental health, they need to know it's part of how it all works. They don't go insane thinking they followed what, you know, these Instagram quotes told them to do, but it's not got them where they want to be.
Yeah, I'm in big agreement of this idea of the standards cliche is missing a piece. I think a lot about the narratives that we have running. Just, you know, the things that we call common wisdom, common knowledge, and so many of them are designed to solve big, broad problems in a worst case scenario type of situation. And that's useful, but then people try to use the exact same knowledge in order to like create a thriving life. It's like those are 2 completely separate things. It's like I don't know, corn is good for you. You know, it's like just that narrative right there. It's, well, if you're in the American Midwest and you're trying to, you know, go, you know, several hundred miles west to start a cabin and, you know, have some babies and live long enough to see a grandchild and do all of that in 40 years, you need to eat some corn or you'll starve. But it's like in the modern day world, and if you want to, you know, live to 80 to 90, maybe past, and, you know, have a life that has possibly less inflammation and pain, you know, corn might not be the thing that you want to eat all day long. And the common knowledge ideas that we get are both like context based, and they're always approximations that are used to mitigate the worst case scenario. And yeah, luck is a good example of that. One last main thing I wanted to touch on to ask you about. Um, what are the strengths that content creators have, and what opportunities do they have in these coming years? And like where should they leverage themselves?
Well, I think the best content creators tend to have a persistent mindset, right? Without going on about my luck analogy now, but no, I think persistence is key. I mean, I'm sure we've all, you know, you're a content creator, I'm a content creator. There's days we wake up and we don't feel like creating content. Now, I'm not saying you should. If you don't feel like it, maybe you shouldn't. But there's equally something in me that says, you know, I'm committed to my purpose. I'm committed to my community, and I'm going to push through that laziness, if you want to call it, or and be persistent and consistent and go ahead and do it. And I think if you look at anyone that's successful, that tends to be their MO. You know, I always reference Casey Neistat because I always liked his stuff on YouTube. You know, he's all in, all out, I guess, because he's not doing much anymore. But when he did do it, he was consistent and he was persistent. And I think that people like that. You know, I think I literally don't. I see a video of yours a day now, Josh, right? And I kind of need it as well. You know, it's like I need that moment. You know, and I'm sure there's an element of you that some days you don't want to make a video. But you know, so I think the success comes from that persistence. But equally, I would argue that content creators need, and I'm a new content creator. I feel like I'm a year into this world, and I think one thing I'm noticing is that you also need to learn to say no and be selfish sometimes, and not always just give. You've got to fill your own bucket first. And I think the best content creators also know when to do that. I mean, I don't want to reference Casey Neistat. I'm now speaking for him, but he's not been doing a YouTube for a while because I feel like he needs to fill his own bucket. Probably, maybe it's his family bucket, maybe it's his lifestyle change that he needs. So there's also that moment when you need to flip and not be consistent, not be persistent. And I think that the best content creators are like that. Musicians are like that, right? They don't do anything for a year and then they come back and do 3 albums in a row that are mind-blowingly amazing. I mean, there's plenty of artists that are like that. I think that's part of the art. You can't be persistent forever and enjoy it, I guess.
Where is your podcast at now, and the Purposeful Project? What are you guys gotten to now, and what are y'all working on?
Every single day we just think about how we can build scalable, useful content and infrastructure that's going to help anybody that needs it start a business of their own. So that's what I permanently think about. We have something pretty exciting we're about to launch in partnership with a big platform that I'm not allowed to name. But maybe when some people are listening to this podcast, if you click through to my website, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I'm now basically working with large platforms to try and bring useful content to their communities that are going to help that community start and grow a business of their own. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how to get these tools in the hands of those that need it. And I don't want to say compete with business schools, because I don't, but basically replace the fee-based system that is education with knowledge and information that's going to help people have a better life without needing to pay through the nose for pointless courses or an education that's out of date.
That's wonderful. Well, where would you like to send folks online now?
Yeah, they can go to my website, simonsquibb.com, or they could pop over to the purposefulproject.com and see if any of the content that we're producing is useful to them. I think everybody should learn entrepreneurship. Everyone is capable of being an entrepreneur. So if anyone wants to, for free, learn entrepreneur skills and learn entrepreneur mindset and learn how to negotiate things, or how to build a brand on a business, or how to raise money, any of these things could be useful to anyone listening, then just pop over to the Purposeful Project. The content's there to help you learn those things.
Wonderful. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure, Simon. Thank you so much for coming
Likewise.
on.
Likewise. I feel like I know you, as I say, so watch a video a day. So it's a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.